Bienvenidos a la Biblioteca Benjamín Franklin. El día de hoy, celebrando el mes de la herencia hispana, presentamos a Selene Góngora Baltasar, especialista méxico-estadounidense en enseñanza del inglés. Ella nos hablará de sus experiencias e historias como inmigrante y la multiculturalidad que eso conlleva. Agradecemos también a la red de American Spaces en México que se encuentran transmitiendo este evento en los centros alrededor del país. Pueden dejar sus preguntas para Selene en los comentarios. Comenzamos.
Hola, ¿qué tal? Bienvenidos a la Biblioteca Benjamín Franklin. Yo soy Brian Flores, soy el coordinador de programas culturales y educativos de este centro. Muchas gracias por acompañarnos el día de hoy. Eh, Mandamos un saludo a todos los American Spaces que están transmitiendo esto en sus centros alrededor del país y a todas las personas que se están uniendo a través del Facebook Live. El día de hoy vamos a presentar la plática Soy de aquí y soy de allá con nuestra queridísima amiga Selene. Y bueno, uno de los temas muy importantes sobre la herencia hispana y todas las celebraciones que conlleva este mes, que va del 15 de septiembre al 15 de octubre, es que cuando una persona enseña inglés, no únicamente está enseñando un idioma, está enseñando también una cultura, un estilo de vida, un estilo de pensamiento. Ujú. Entonces, no se limiten únicamente a saber de gramática, de spelling, de pronunciation. Empápense de esa cultura estadounidense que además es muy bonita, es muy variada y que además ha tenido un impacto a nivel mundial en todas las culturas. Entonces, quieren ser unos buenos profesores de inglés, quieren estudiar en Estados Unidos, un intercambio, una beca, scholarship, cualquier programa del Departamento de Estado. Conozcan estas culturas, conozcan las tradiciones, conozcan también todo el tipo de diversidad que hay dentro de la cultura hispana en Estados Unidos, porque bueno, ahorita Selene es México-americana o estadounidense, perdón, México-estadounidense, pero el mes de la herencia hispana no es únicamente gente que tiene ascendencia mexicana, sino de cualquier país hispanohablante. Entonces, es una cultura, es un tema demasiado amplio que incluso en un mes no podríamos terminar de explicar, pero pues bueno, el día de hoy tenemos a Selene y los invitamos también a participar en las actividades que tenemos aquí en la biblioteca, como son los clubes de conversación, las mentorías de inglés todos los martes, los webinars y los talleres para maestros de inglés impartidos también por Selene para aquellos que la están viendo por primera vez. De verdad, ella es una especialista en la enseñanza del inglés, está muy bien preparada y es muy buena para dar estos talleres. Y recuerden que todas las actividades en esta biblioteca y en todos los American Spaces de México son completamente gratuitos. Y tenemos todavía dos películas más del mes de la herencia hispana. Ok, vamos a estar presentando justamente el día de hoy a las 5 de la tarde, Real Women Have Curves. Entonces, les recomiendo que vengan y que se unan a estas actividades, ¿ok? Entonces, Selene, pues te paso el micrófono y pues bienvenida.
Muchas gracias. Wow. What an introduction. What an introduction. Thank you so much, Brian. Yeah, I'll be up here. Again, thank you. Thank all of you for being here at this for this chat, and everybody else who's watching live or who is at another American space listening to this chat. Of course, if there are any questions that you would like to ask, don't be shy. People tend to be very curious about my life as an immigrant, and I welcome those questions. And you'll see why. As soon as I start talking, about my whole experience, you'll see why I welcome these questions and why I want to share as much as possible. Is there? Thank you. Ooh. So the title of my presentation is Soy de aquí y de allá. I try to emphasize the E. In English, the and, it's a little bit, you hear it a little bit more because it's a longer word. Even though the presentation is in English, I wanted my title to be in Spanish. It's one of those things that demonstrates being not just bicultural, but also bilingual. I wanted to start first with my name and introducing very quickly who I am. My name is Selene Góngora Baltasar. Those of you who are here, I know all of you. For those of you in other American spaces, I am an English language fellow here in Mexico City, and I work with teachers from Escuelas Normales at DGNAM, who is my host institution. That's it. That's all I'll say about my job. I wanted to first start also with one picture that has been very powerful in my life, as I think it shows the duality that I live in every day. And the ocean is very dear to me. I love the ocean. So I think it even has a deeper meaning. This picture that you see here, anybody know what this is right here? Yeah, it's the border. It's the actual border in Tijuana and San Diego. That wall is there, but and a lot of people have a negative view of it, and I understand that 100%, how it keeps families separate. But for me, it also represents like I said, my duality, and how the water here around it, especially the water, it moves, it flows on both sides. And that's the best, I guess, metaphor that I can, or picture to show how I feel about having a dual, or being bicultural, bilingual, all of these dual words. Before I continue, I know it's awkward to put disclaimers, but everybody's experience is different. This is my experience as an immigrant. Everybody else's is different and just as valid. So if you hear other stories, ask them about their story. Don't compare their story to mine, because again, everybody's is different. All right. Because I'm a teacher, we're gonna put into practice, we're gonna do a quick activity, and this is for everybody else as well who's watching us live. Whether it's your cell phone or mentally, and this is all I would like you to do. Write as many as you can. I'm gonna show you what it is. Just fill in the blanks, as many as you can. All right? So you can use your cell phone, you can use something to write on. And here it is. I am. I am blank. I am blank. I am blank. Just write anything that comes into your mind. Not yet. As many as you can. One word is enough per line. One word is enough. If you want to write more, that's okay. This is your poem. Hopefully everybody else at the American Spaces, you're also doing this on Facebook. Also, make sure you're writing as many as you can. I'll give you 10 more seconds. 10. 5. 3, 2, and 1. All right, you can stop writing. So what I would like you to do right now is look at what you wrote. Is there a pattern of what you wrote? We're not going to share just yet, but think about what you wrote. Do you see a pattern? Did you write specifically about one part of you? Did you write about another part of you? Did you write about all of you, all the aspects that are you? This is a very common activity that I was asked to do at school in the US. And as I started doing it, I wrote at the beginning as a 6th grader, I wrote about my personality. I am happy, I am outgoing, I am sportsy, I am energetic. I would write those kinds of things. However, as life went on and I got older, my answers started to change. And sometimes I even felt awkward answering this simple fill in the blank. Why? Well, as you get older in the US, you have to fill out forms that ask you your name, your date of birth. They ask you for very general information, male, female, da-da-da-da-da. But then they also start asking about questions like this. I don't know if you can see the question. The first question is, are you Hispanic or Latino? Of course, I will always put yes. And then they ask me this question. Select the racial category or categories with which you most closely identify. Check as many as apply. American Indian, Alaskan Native. Asian, Black or African American. Native Hawaiian or other Pacific Islander. White. I'm none of those. And so imagine Selene as a 15-year-old having to answer these questions in high school for whatever form, or when I was filling out my applications for college in my senior year, and they want to know this information. I'm happy that this is here, but then over here, I'm none of that. In the US, race, the word race, is sometimes used interchangeably with heritage. But really race, all they're asking is, what do you look like, right? That's all it means, and it's a social construct. Yet, they still want to know what you categorize yourself as. Oh, we can go deeper into this question because there's also history behind how Mexicans in the US started, we had to put white. I was told I had to put white. I'm like, do you see this color? It's not white. So I would put white if I had to, or if it made me choose something. If I could leave it blank, I would always leave it blank, depending on the system that I was clicking on. If it was a paper form, I would write I'm Mexican. But you can see unconsciously how these kinds of forms can sometimes put you into a box or make you think about race and what are you and who are you. I mean, in Mexico, how often do people ask you where you're from? Maybe you say, oh, I'm from here, I'm Mexican. Or maybe you might say, oh, my parents are from Jalisco, my parents are from blah, but I'm Mexican. That's it, end of story. In the US, because it's such a diverse country, I mean, Mexico, it's such a diverse country as well, actually, that we should have other kinds of questions. But in the US, these need modification. So, who am I? Once I started reflecting on this, I'm like, okay. So let me tell you a little bit about myself and my family background. My mother is from Guanajuato, a very, very small town called Iramuco. And then my dad is from Zacatecas. I don't remember the name where he's from. I don't. Both of them, when they were 14 years old, separately, independently from each other, both of them moved to Tijuana when they were 14. Eventually they met, fell in love, got married, you know, all that fun stuff, and eventually they had 4 children. Can you see me? No? I have the same face. So first is my brother, and then my older sister. That's me. Now you see it. And then that's my little sister. I think I was, I don't know, maybe like 6 years old here. Yeah. So we lived in Tijuana until I was 10 years old. So I went to school in Tijuana. I grew up, you know, singing Mexican songs in Spanish, all the food, family stuff, all of it, just a normal Mexican kid in Tijuana. Then suddenly, I remember, and I still remember that, suddenly, it felt like out of the blue to us. My parents had been planning this for years, for 10 years actually. I was 10 years old, and suddenly my parents come to us, and they tell us, pack up, we're leaving. We're like, where? And they're like, al otro lado. We knew what that meant. I'm from the border, so we would cross the border often to see family, to go shopping, to go eat. You know, it's very common. But to live there, what? I don't even speak English. I didn't speak English. I think I spoke 2-3 words, like thank you, yes, my name is. that was the English that I knew at the moment. So I always use the verb taken. I was taken to San Diego, California. I didn't have a choice. It was my parents who wanted to take me. They had a dream, of course, the American dream. Give their children more opportunities, have them go to school over there. So they took us there, all 4 of us, and I went from a 5th grader, this was my last year in Tijuana, to a 6th grader in the US. Can you find me? All right, over here in Niños Héroes, this was my elementary school in Tijuana. I am right here. I have the same cheeks. Later, when I moved to the US, this is my class, this is my teacher, Mrs. I still remember her name because I thought, yes, she's Mexican because her name is Mrs. Solorzano, but she didn't speak Spanish. Yeah. So Mrs. Solorzano, I am right there. Yeah. At Libby Elementary School, this was actually in Oceanside, where we ended up my first year. So I had to start all over. No friends, no English. Very diverse class. Maybe half of my classmates spoke some Spanish. And this was the first time that I encountered people who were embarrassed to speak Spanish. Some of my classmates, they grew up in the US their whole life, and they didn't, even though they spoke Spanish, they didn't want to talk to me in Spanish. And I'll get into that a little later, in some words that were used to describe them and then me eventually. So I had to start all over. And what happened right away? Have you heard of this word, assimilate? In the US, immigrants are told you have to assimilate to the American culture. Become like an American. My name stopped being Selene, and it became Selene, like Celine Dion. And I had to adopt that name because some people refused to use my name, Selene. So eventually, I fought it, but eventually I kind of gave up. And I went with Celine and whatever people wanted to call me. Later, especially way later, I'm like, no. My name is Selene. It's not Celine. The education system, it's very Eurocentric. Textbooks, they don't have representation of people who look like me, people who have the same background. So that was tough for me to connect with everything that was happening at school, because that school system was not built for me, for somebody like me. Even at home, imagine my dad telling me, Selene, don't speak Spanish anymore. You have to speak English now. You're in the US. Don't speak Spanish anymore. And he told me this right away at 10 years old. How do you think I felt? It created shame of my own language, of my native language. Of course, all of this happened unconsciously, and it evolved into other things. But when you're a kid and people tell you these things, they become very negative in your mind, and you create this image of you that your culture is not valid anymore, that you have to assimilate to the new culture. So all of that was put into question. And it happens very internal. I'm not what was that? No, it's too loud. Oh, there we go. Okay, better. Thank you. So again, this happened very internally, and it just evolved into some very negative feelings. Then, I keep growing up, going to school, meeting other people, and this keeps happening in other ways. How? Well, people start asking me, Selene, are you more Mexican or more American? What do you mean? And I thought I had to answer. So I would make it up. If it was an American asking me, I would say, I'm American. If it was a Mexican person, I'd be like, I'm Mexican. So because I didn't even know how to answer that question. People would ask me, do you dream? Do you think in English or in Spanish? Oh, if you dream in English, that means you're a native now. You've mastered the language. But still, those very insignificant questions, they affected me. Then family members in Tijuana, they would say things like, ¿Eres mexicana y no comes carne? I became vegetarian at 15 years old. So imagine that. ¿Eres mexicana y no comes chile? Yes, I didn't like spicy. I like it now. I didn't back then. I redeemed myself in that sense, I guess. But this is my own family telling me these kinds of things. Everybody had an opinion of what I should be or what I was not to them. And then, of course, the classic, ay, hablas español como gringa. Ay, tienes un acentito. What do you want me to do with that? that again, maybe they seem insignificant, maybe they didn't mean any harm, but still, internally, you start thinking about this. Well, am I supposed to speak like this? Oh, am I supposed to like this? Oh, I'm not doing this, so I'm not enough Mexican. Oh, I'm not enough American because I don't go to football games. What's the deal? And I like soccer, so what? But again, some people, they want to construct this identity for you, I felt. And I was not very fond of that. In France, when I was living in France, it also happened. People were curious, and they would ask me, especially these two questions. So to have those questions over there, it made me even feel like, okay, now I have to do it in Europe as well? What's going on? So of course, I started looking for meaning in other ways because I thought, oh, I'm not Mexican enough because I live in the US. So I started taking Chicano studies class. And it was different ones. I took history, I took film. Actually, the film that is going to be here today at the BFL, it's one of the movies that we watched in my Chicana studies class. Real Women Have Curves. So I really like that movie. I watched it since then. My rhetoric writing class was also Chicana focused. I started taking Spanish classes for heritage speakers because I wanted to get rid of that gringa accent. That's what I thought back then. I also wanted to connect more with my community, so I joined MECHA. This is a club, and it stands for Movimiento Estudiantil Chicano de Aztlán. It's mainly Mexican people who are second generation, third generation, first generation in the US. It's a community. It's a student group. So I joined it in my last year of high school, and then I kept going in university. And this was a great space for us to talk about these kinds of issues. And from everything from identity to history to current issues as well, because those were very relevant for us as well. So, I just wanted to connect with my Mexican side especially. My healing also continued on through traveling. I started traveling, excuse me. I've been everywhere. I've lived in Asia for 10 years. I've traveled in Europe, Southeast Asia over here, and traveling also gave me a perspective. This perspective of, the world is not black and white. I don't have to be this and I don't have to be that. Everything's mixed, everything is mingled, people mingle. Why do I have to define myself as one thing and not the other? And of course, the healing still continues to this day. This is why I chose, or I really was hoping for a fellowship here in Mexico. When I applied to the program, this was one of my goals, my personal goals, to reconnect with my culture, to reconnect with my country. So I'm really, really glad that I ended up here in Mexico, and I've been able to just immerse myself in what our beautiful country is. And of course, I get to celebrate both cultures now. Part of that healing process became I get to celebrate both sides. Again, the world is not black and white. So I can be both Mexican and American. I can put up my ofrenda in Korea. This was in Korea, by the way. So as you can see from the soju, I offered soju to my grandparents. I made vegan pan de muerto for my grandparents. So this was in Korea. I love cooking, and because I'm vegetarian, well, vegan as well, I also wanted to connect to cooking through, or connect to my culture through cooking. So this was in Korea again. I've made all kinds of things over there, and these are all vegetarian or vegan. I made tamales, I made sopes, I made chorizo, I made a vegetarian version of like pozole, yeah, with mushrooms. And this was not easy, by the way. Getting ingredients over there is not easy. Getting like all the chiles that we need for all the sauces, my family had to ship those to me. They had to ship me the hojas for the tamal. They had to ship me the flour, the la maseca for tamales. They had to ship that as well for me to me. But I also get to celebrate American stuff. Halloween, Thanksgiving, 4th of July, and even now, I also celebrate Chuseok. Anybody know what is Chuseok? I guess in easy terms, it is the Korean Thanksgiving. It happened a week and a half ago. Did you see the big moon a week and a half ago? So Chuseok goes by the lunar calendar. So around this time when we have that big moon is when in Korea they celebrate Chuseok. Because I lived in Korea for so long, it just became part of me. And whether I get to celebrate it with food and friends, or I cook some Korean food, that's my way of celebrating and honoring that part of me as well. I forgot to talk about this picture. This picture was from the summer. I was in Washington, I was invited to Washington, D.C. to talk about my experience as a fellow over there. And again, I wanted to represent my culture. So I wore this beautiful pink dress with all the flowers, very traditional. And people were like, oh, that's and it made me feel really good that people recognized and were curious about it. ¿Cómo hice el chorizo? So you need tofu, you need mushrooms, and then you get, for the adobo, you need all the chiles. Oh my God, there's like 4 of them. I forget. Chile pasilla, chile, oh man, guajillo, thank you. Yes, guajillo is one of the main ones. Chile pasilla, guajillo, pasilla. There's 2 more. Morita? Ancho. There we go, the ancho one, definitely. And you know what? I had to do it in powder form because the chiles come with seeds, so they couldn't ship those over. So I had to have my family find the powder form of each of these and send it to me so that I could make chorizo. Of course, it was a little bit different. It tasted slightly differently. But when you're in Korea, beggars can be choosers. And it was perfect for me. So, to bring it all back, because I'm a teacher, And I want to make sure that I don't make the mistakes that some of my teachers made. I want to make sure I honor my students' heritage, wherever it's from. So I want to make sure I empower them through first self-expression. So the I am poem that all of you just did. I do something similar with this poem right here. After we do one like that, we do something like this, depending on the level of my students, just to get to know them a little better. We also do self-portraits. I want to give them that space so that they get to express who they are. I don't know if you've ever done self-portraits, you get some beautiful, beautiful representations. I didn't tell you the story about my language story. Do we have time? We do have time, okay. So let me back up to when I was a 6th grader. Remember, that was my first year in the US, okay? So everybody know what is a warm-up in a class? When do you do the warm-up? At the beginning. So as the students are coming in, you warm up with an activity. This is just to activate their brains. It can be anything. It can relate to the lesson of the day, but it doesn't have to. It's just to get your students thinking. And my teacher asked, okay, everybody please write, what other languages around the world do you know of? Not that you speak, but that you know of. So they gave us 5 minutes. People start writing. And I start writing. Oh yeah, this is my jam. I start writing. So then, when my teacher asks for volunteers, one student says, French. Great answer, French. Another student, Chinese. Great answer, Chinese. Another one, nothing. I'm like, okay, I have an answer. Selene. Oh, actually, she called me Selene. Selene. And I say, Zapoteca. She looks at me and she was a little puzzled. She's like, oh, okay, Zapoteca. She writes it, or she tries to write it. And then, okay, other answers. Nothing from my classmates. So I'm like, I raise my hand. Celine, Otomi. Okay, Otomi. Another answer, anybody else? Nothing. I'm like, I have an answer. Celine, Yaki. Okay. She writes it, or she tries to write it again. Any more? I raise my hand again. I wanted to say Nahuatl, but my teacher, when she saw me raise my hand, she's like, oh, Celine, let's hear other kind of answers. This was my knowledge, my background information, my culture, what I grew up with. And in that instant, she negated all of it. All of it. So again, think about how itty bitty Celine and Selene process this. Oh, these are not languages? Oh, these are not real? Oh, I can't use them in academic settings? And, all of those questions happen in your brain unconsciously. And again, that internal feelings of shame, embarrassment, they brood, they cook in here. So I don't want to make that mistake with my students. So I want to make sure that when I ask my students questions, especially open-ended questions, that I keep an open mind and accept their answers, because that's their reality, that's their culture. Culture is more than what we see as well, by the way. Culture is also, it can be beliefs, right? Cultures is also gender. You don't see gender sometimes. Culture can be subcultures as well. Culture, this reminded me actually of a student in Korea. In Korea, there's a very sad history with Japan. And little kids hear stories from their grandmothers, especially their grandmothers. Grandmothers over there went through a tough time when the Japanese were colonizing Korea. I don't want to get into it, but when we would draw pictures of things that we like and things we don't like, I had every time there were students who would say, "I don't like Japan." And at the beginning, I'm like, "Oh, this is very strong." We don't say that about people. We don't say that about countries. As I got to know the history in the context, I understood that they were coming from this background where their grandmothers were abused, where their grandmothers, and they're still alive because this didn't happen that long ago. This happened in the 40s, in the 50s. Well, in the 50s it kind of ended, but you know, these grandmas are still there, and they tell these stories to their grandchildren, their great-great-grandchildren. So before, you know, I had to stop judging those kind of answers, especially because they were little kids, and it was a little hard for me to have this conversation of, let's talk about your answers. So again, that all of my experience as an immigrant in the U.S., it shaped me to the person that I am. This person. Remember my picture at the beginning of the ocean, in between that wall? That I go, you know, I can be here, I can be there, it doesn't matter. But also it shaped me into the teacher that I am now. I want to make sure that I honor my students' culture, whatever that is, that I honor that, and I give them spaces to express that culture. All right, I think. What questions do you have? I don't know if we have any questions from Facebook or the American Spaces, if for those of you watching there. But here, any questions? Anything that you want to ask about my experience growing up bicultural, bilingual? Don't be shy. I'm not shy.
We have a question from
Sure.
Facebook. Felicidades, hermosa experiencia. Desde tu perspectiva de adulto hoy en día, ¿qué recomiendas a los padres haber priorizado para apoyar tu integración en un país extranjero y al mismo tiempo apoyar la mentalidad bicultural?
That's a tough one, because I told you my dad, he told me, don't speak Spanish anymore. I'm very thankful that my mother never learned English, so I was able to speak Spanish with her. I would encourage parents it's possible to do both languages. It is possible. I'm a living proof of that. I can write, I can read it, and you don't have to choose one. So if you have children who are growing up biculturally, make sure you support both sides. This is something that I do with that we talk amongst my siblings and I. For example, if you watch a movie, a Disney movie, let's say, in English, you know how kids like to watch movies over and over and over and over? So watch it in English, and then watch it in Spanish. And if you want, throw it in Chinese as well, or French, or whatever languages that are available. We don't have to, fall into this idea that you have to learn one. Remember, or earlier I told you about a word that I don't like, but I have embraced it since then. The word pocha. Have you heard this word? If people call me pocha at the beginning, used to call me pocha, it would make me feel embarrassed. Now I'm like, so what? I'm bilingual. You're not. Ha! I own it now. Yes, I may have a little bit of an accent, but everybody has accents. Native speakers in the US, if you're from California, you have an accent. If you're from the South, you have an accent. If you're from the East Coast, you have an accent. It's different. Do you remember not long ago, there was a controversial thing that happened with, what's her name? Yaritza y su esencia. Because they asked them, oh, do you like Mexican food? And then one of the young boys said, oh, no, yo soy delicado, nada más como pollito, or something like that. And everybody jumped to criticize them. I thought it was funny, but then as I reflected on this, I'm like, give these kids a break. They grew up. That's their experience in the US. Language, food are not your roots. You don't have, again, no comes esto, entonces no eres mexicana. Let's step away from that, criticism. And if these kids want to come here and just, enjoy whatever they want to enjoy, let them. That's their perspective. That is their experience. So again, for parents, if you have little ones, teenagers, allow both sides and give them opportunities to explore both sides. And that was a really long answer, but I hope they got my message. Was there another one? Or over here? Yes.
Talking about pocho or chilango, the word chilango doesn't offend
no
to me.
sabo kids.
Doesn't offend to me, the word chilango. I'm a chilango and I'm
You own it.
proud of it. Does the word gringo offend to white Americans?
To white Americans.
Yeah, the word
You
gringo.
would have to ask a white American this question. I cannot speak for them. I can speak for my friends who, I don't use the word gringo with them, but they use it with themselves. I don't know, Jennifer, if you're watching, she's another fellow she lives in Hermosillo. She uses the word sometimes to describe herself. And she doesn't make a big deal out of it. Yeah, I'm a gringa, so what? If you tell me, oh, you're a pocha, yeah, so what? It's about some words, they're not that nice, but some words like that we can reclaim and use them to empower ourselves. Yeah. Thank you for your question. Anybody else? Yes.
Good afternoon. Thank you so much for your presentation. It's like a comment and a reflection
Sure, please.
because I have family in Chicago, Illinois, and they were married with Afro-Americans. So obviously they got children.
Mixed babies, yay!
Yes, mixed babies. But the sad thing about this is that they didn't learn the children to speak in Spanish.
Okay.
It's very sad. My grandmother, she's still alive. She still lives. She's 140 years old.
What's her
Yes.
secret?
She's Mexican.
They keep the Mexican genes. They keep you
Living there,
young.
yes. So they just only speak in Spanish.
Mhm.
Yes, she just only learn a few words in English. But if they want to speak with them, Mama, Mama, I love you, Mama. But
Uh-huh.
there is not a lot of words in Spanish.
Mhm.
So, what would you recommend or say to my family members there?
Well, again,
Why they do that?
we have to understand that it's very complicated. It's not an easy answer. It's not just like, oh, well, have them read in Spanish kind of thing. It's a process, and also the environment. My siblings some of my siblings, we all have different opinions on this as well, and that depends as well on their opinion. I wouldn't criticize your family's choices or unconscious choice of not teaching them Spanish. As I said, Spanish is not your roots. If they want to communicate with their grandmother, there are other ways to communicate. You know, big, warm hug. I'm gonna cry because I didn't get to hug my grandmother. It's been a long time. So, you know, a hug. Cooking together. You don't have to speak. Dancing together, you know. Those moments, the children will cherish. Language, of course, you know, they want to say things, but let's not be judgmental about, they're, qué malos papás, no le están enseñando español. And this happens with not just Latinos, Mexicanos, it happens with all kinds of people in the US and Canada, and vice versa as well. So, again, it's very complex. I would just invite them to just have more time activities together if they want to be with their grandparents. Yeah.
Yes, because, I have to add another comment. Sure. Because the racism in the United States is very complicated.
Yes.
Yes, Trump gone away, but the ideas of racism is very strong there. So I haven't lived in there, so I can understand why they do that. No.
And this was one reason why my father told me to forget Spanish. He had lived in the US previously, so he knew the racism that happens in the US, and he was protecting us. So again, it doesn't come from a bad place. It doesn't come from, a bad place. He was just protecting us from that racism. But unfortunately, when you look like this, things happen.
Yes,
Thank you so much for your comments. Anybody else?
Si alguien quiere hacer su comentario en español, está bien, ¿eh? No hay
También.
problema. Ujú.
Claro que sí.
Bueno, nada más quiero compartir un pequeño comentario.
Claro.
Mi hermano emigró igual hace como 12 años, pero pues él por otras situaciones y me quedó como esa sensación de, bueno, ¿y por qué? Ahorita lo que tú nos compartiste fue el buscar mejores oportunidades para mis sobrinos y para mi cuñada. Y fue como haber cerrado ese... Ay, no quiero chillar. Fue como haber cerrado ese ciclo. A pesar de que ella no está aquí, falleció allá. Entonces entiendo que él quiso darle una mejor oportunidad a mis sobrinos y pues lo entendí ahorita contigo. Entonces pues cierro ese círculo. Muchas gracias.
Qué bonito. Muchas
Gracias.
Muchas gracias, sí. Es un sueño que muchos de nuestros papás tienen para nosotros, muy bonito.
Sí, yo quería hacer un comentario con una pregunta también.
Claro que sí.
Me gustó en especial este tema porque creo que influye mucho lo que es el tema de la migración, los dreamers, ¿no? Mexicanos nacidos aquí que estudian allá, los mexicoamericanos con doble nacionalidad. Igualmente hay americanos, conozco americanos que nacen allá, sin embargo se vienen para acá porque su familia se regresa para acá,
Eso
¿no?
pasa, claro.
Entonces me quedo pensando en este tema porque yo conozco y sé que hay personas, incluso latinas, que excluyen a los mismos latinos, ¿no? A mí mismo me pasó una ocasión en la que me dijeron, sorry, I don't speak Spanish, y su apellido era Martínez, ¿no? Entonces, yo hablando español y simplemente no les agrada, ¿no? Entonces, ¿qué recomendación le daría ahora para aquellas personas que son de aquí de México, pero pertenecen a un pueblo originario? Tienen aparte una lengua materna, ya sea náhuatl, maya, otomí, zapoteco, mixteco, y sin embargo migran para allá. Tienen aquí en México, aparte de esa lengua materna que tienen, pues deben de aprender español. Y ahora al migrar a Estados Unidos, teniendo, digamos, 3 idiomas diferentes, ¿qué recomendación les daría a aquellas personas?
Cuando ya viven en Estados Unidos, y bueno, otra vez depende del contexto, esta es mi opinión, y porque soy maestra and a linguist. And because of my background, all of these things form my very personal opinion of if the parents can try to keep Spanish and their lengua originaria, please do. People are polyglots. There's nothing wrong with that. I actually speak more than 2 languages, and it helps. It helps. It helps your brain even with Alzheimer's. So I would recommend, whether, again, if it's Spanish, if it's a lengua originaria, and if it's 3 of them, 4 of them, and then they go to the US, keep practicing. For their parents, so remember how I told you my mom never learned Spanish? So at home, I would speak Spanish a lot because of my mom, and depending on my sibling, I speak Spanish with my older sister, I speak English with my little sister, and I speak Spanish also with my older brother. So at home, I was getting Spanish. And at school, academically, I was getting English. So I was able to, keep both. Yes, academically, my Spanish isn't great. But you know what? That's my reality. That's okay. I can communicate with anybody. I can function here. So if they can find opportunities in the US for families like that, find them and take advantage of those. There are so many. You saw, I told you I was in these clubs. I was taking all these classes. And there are those classes for all ethnicities, all nationalities in the US. Does that answer kind of your question? Yeah. Don't forget your native language. That's my point. Don't forget it. If it happens, because it happens, then let's not shame them for going through that process. The no sabo kids, the pochos. Let's step away from those words. And, if you're family and you can, joke around with them, fine, but don't judge other people because you don't know what they went through. Other questions? Yes.
How was the process of your second language acquisition?
Ooh,
And
great
what
question.
kind of strategies did you?
Well, after my master's degree in applied linguistics, I understood my process because I didn't know my process before that. I'm like, I speak English now. I don't know what happened. So when I started my master's degree, and I started making connections. So this is what happened. Do you remember how old I was when I went to the US? I was 10 years old, so 6th grade. I was ahead of my group because in Tijuana, I'm a September baby. So usually September babies are held back in Mexico. So my mom pushed for me to be with the kids from my year. So anyways, I was 10 years old when I was in sixth grade. I was 10. I don't know if anybody here knows anything about the plasticity of your brain. There's an age limit where your brain kind of hits a plateau, language-wise. Do you know what age that is? It's around 12, 13. So I barely made it in to get all the input. Now, as you can now tell something a little bit about me, I'm a little bit of a nerd. I love going to school. So when I was in 6th grade, because my teacher, remember, she didn't speak Spanish, but she saw something in me. She said, this kid, not to toot my own horn, she said, this kid, she's smart. Let's put her in a reading club. So Tuesdays and Thursdays, I would leave my classroom and I would go to the library and read with the teacher in English. She was bilingual. So, man, in 1 year, I was already communicating in English. It wasn't perfect. By the time I go to middle school, because of my background, my immigration background, they put me in ELD classes, English Language Development. So they put me in these classes at the lowest level because I only lived in the US for 1 year. Right away, my teachers are like, you don't belong here. You're too advanced. So they start moving me to higher ELD classes. 8th grade, well, in 7th grade, I had history, science in Spanish, PE, English, art in English, and then my ELD classes. So, there was some Spanish there as well. Bilingual, they call it bilingual education. When I go to 8th grade, everything is in English. I was with the white kids already. And I'm like, whoa. So basically it took about 2 years, and without learning explicitly. There were no grammar lessons. There were no, grammar. Everything was reading, playing games. But again, because I was still at that age where my brain could absorb the language, that's how I was able to, cross that threshold. So when people ask me, you must be a native speaker then, because sometimes people can't hear my Spanish accent. And I'm like, well, no, not really. I am a non-perceivable, non-native English speaker. Because I was still young, but not so young, because still Spanish is my first language. I never took a grammar class because I was, again, young. Same thing with my little sister. She was 5 years old. She started 1st grade in the US in 3 months. La 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 la, she was speaking. My older brother, because he was 14 years old, so above the threshold. But he has an interesting story because he loved watching American TV in Tijuana. So he knew English through cartoons, especially The Simpsons. He loves The Simpsons. The person who had the toughest time learning the language, who actually had to do grammar classes and all these vocabulary techniques and was my older sister, who was 12. She was just at that limit. So for her, it was a little harder to acquire the language. But yeah, that's my language story. I was a kid and I absorbed it. Anything else?
Pues es una inconformidad un poco más política que otra cosa. Tengo contacto todavía con maestros porque estuve en un programa de entrenamiento en la Universidad de Austin, en Texas, en Austin. Y sigo teniendo contacto con los maestros y veo que uno de mis maestros da clases como en una iglesia para migrantes, para que aprendan inglés. Y por otro lado veo que aquí en México estamos quitando de las zonas rurales el inglés en las secundarias o en las prepas, donde quiera que se usara, ¿no? Y a mí no me hace sentido, en un término muy fuerte, digamos, yo puedo decir, exportamos migrantes, ¿cómo es posible que no los enviemos siquiera con inglés? Entonces, esa es mi opinión, que los tenga que entrenar mi maestro allá en Estados Unidos, entre otras cosas, ¿no?
Sí, y creo que esto también tiene que ver, como dices, con la política y las lenguas originarias también, para protegerlas, porque eso es muy importante. But we can do both. That's the thing. We can do both. It doesn't have to be either or. So hopefully, not too far from today, we can embrace both and keep both and grow both of them. Yeah, and it's all politics sometimes at the end, yeah. So my last thing that I want to say to you, that when people ask me, Selene, are you more Mexican or more American? What do you think I answer? ¿Soy de aquí? Y soy de allá. Soy de los dos lados. Muchas gracias por estar aquí and listening to this, to my story. I've never been able to tell this story before in a formal setting, so thank you so much to the BFL, Claudia.
We have
Thank you
one
so much.
last comment from
comment.
Facebook.
Sure.
Sandra Ramirez says, thanks for sharing your story. You touched my heart.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah. Ok, so, gracias por acompañarnos el día de hoy. Esperamos les haya gustado mucho la presentación de Selene. Y Selene, muchas gracias por compartir algo más allá de solo tu conocimiento, sino tu historia de vida, tu cultura, tu esencia, que eso es muy importante, que siempre nos logras transmitir tanto en tus clases como en tus talleres, como en este tipo de pláticas. Y pues por compartir esto con todo México y con toda la red de American Spaces. Entonces, pues, muchas gracias por asistir. Esperamos vuelvan pronto, los esperamos ver por aquí y recuerden que hoy tenemos a las 5 de la tarde nuestra tarde de cine. ¿Ok? Gracias.
La Biblioteca Benjamín Franklin agradece su participación. No olvides estar pendiente de nuestras redes sociales y nuestro boletín para enterarte de todas nuestras actividades. Hasta la próxima. La Biblioteca Benjamín Franklin